What we saw unfold on the field was one of those moments that sticks with a team long after the clock hits zero, and the emotional weight of it was written all over the Ravens afterward. There was a sense that the game had narrowed down to one defining play, one defining moment. And that kind of pressure can overwhelm even the most prepared players. When the kick missed, the reaction inside the locker room was not about pointing fingers or placing blame on a rookie who suddenly found himself at the center of the storm. The message was clear and consistent. This is a team game, and when things go wrong, everyone shares that weight together. The quarterback made that clear, choosing to acknowledge the mistake without letting it define the player or fracture the unity of the group. And that tone matters more than people realize in moments like this. At the same time, frustration was impossible to hide. The emotions were raw, not manufactured, not calculated. Just the natural response of a competitor who had poured everything into the game. There was visible irritation over physical moments during the contest, plays that felt like they crossed a line, and that tension spilled over briefly before cooler heads prevailed. Questions from the media only added to the fire, especially when they drifted away from the immediate pain of the loss and into conversations about contracts, futures, and next season. For a player still processing what had just happened, those questions landed at the wrong time, and the response reflected someone who was still fully locked into the moment, still stunned, still replaying every snap in his head. And that is where the narrative around the quarterback needs to be handled carefully. Too often, everything circles back to him, regardless of who made the mistake or which unit faltered. When the team wins, it is expected. When the team loses, the microscope zooms in on him even tighter. What gets lost in that cycle is how brilliantly he played when it mattered most. Those late drives were not accidental. They were controlled, confident, and decisive. Touchdown throws under pressure, command of the offense, and the ability to keep pushing forward despite the stakes all pointed to a player who embraced the moment rather than shrinking from it. For all the talk about whether he can deliver in big situations, that stretch of the game provided a clear answer. Statistically, the performance stood up just fine, completing 11 of 18 passes for 238 yards with 3 touchdowns. Tells part of the story, but not the whole thing. The interception came on a strange play that did not reflect poor decision-making. And while there were a couple of throws that were not perfectly placed, that is true of every quarterback. In every game, what stood out more was how little he relied on his legs compared to previous seasons. A reflection of how much punishment he absorbed earlier in the year, and how the offense has evolved to protect him. Even without that rushing threat being fully unleashed, he still found ways to dissect the defense when it mattered most. Then came the moment that reignited everything after the final whistle. The missed kick did not exist in a vacuum. There was controversy surrounding the play. Questions about whether a rule had been violated, whether leverage was used illegally, whether contact with the long snapper should have drawn a penalty for players on the field. These details are not abstract. They are the difference between walking off the field defeated or lining up again with the game still alive. When similar situations earlier in the season resulted in flags against the Ravens, the lack of consistency was impossible to ignore. That inconsistency fuels frustration, especially when video evidence appears to show actions that have been penalized before. The quarterback's reaction afterward was not dramatic or inflammatory, just a brief expression of disbelief that resonated with fans and players alike. It captured the feeling that something critical had been taken out of their hands. When former players and analysts look at the footage and say the call has been made for less, that only sharpens the sting. From a player's perspective, it is hard to accept that standard changes depending on the moment or the teams involved. That sense of injustice lingers far longer than the physical exhaustion from the game itself. Still, what cannot be ignored is how the Ravens were in position to win despite everything. 3 late scoring drives in a matter of minutes do not happen by accident. They happen because a quarterback reads the field, trusts his receivers, and refuses to let the situation overwhelm him. That is exactly what fans have been asking for year after year, and in this game, it happened repeatedly. The defense and special teams units that had carried the team at various points during the season could not close the door this time. That reality does not erase the quarterback's imperfections, but it does reframe the conversation about responsibility and blame. This loss did not come down to a lack of effort or heart from the team's leader. It came down to a collection of moments, missed opportunities, questionable calls, and breakdowns that added up at the worst possible time. The frustration you saw afterward was not about ego or excuses. It was about a competitor who believed, with good reason, that he had done enough to put his team over the top and watched that chance slip away anyway. As the emotions from the loss began to settle, the conversation naturally shifted toward what this result means moving forward. And that is where things start to feel heavier for a franchise that expected more. The first day of the offseason always arrives abruptly when a season ends like this. And for the Ravens, it brings uncomfortable questions about direction, leadership, and whether the current structure is still capable of getting this team over the final hurdle. These are not overreactions born from one missed kick, but thoughts that have been building over time, especially when postseason endings follow a familiar pattern of frustration. At the center of that discussion is the head coach, and whether the voice that has guided this team for so long still resonates the same way inside the building. Former players have openly wondered if the message has grown stale, if the team needs to hear something different to unlock that next level. When you look at this game in particular, there were moments where the Ravens had momentum firmly in their grasp, but never created the separation needed to put the opponent away. Playing that close for that long keeps the door open, and eventually it invites chaos. In games of this magnitude, chaos rarely favors the team that lets opportunities slip. Offensive decisions quickly became part of the scrutiny, especially the handling of the running game. The production in the first half was undeniable, with the ground attack controlling tempo and wearing down the defense. Yet as the game progressed, that identity faded. While game flow is often cited as the explanation, it becomes a difficult argument to defend when the score remains within one possession. For most of the contest, abandoning what works, even temporarily, has been a recurring frustration for fans. And this game reopened that wound. The offense did not completely move away from the run, but the imbalance was noticeable enough to change the rhythm and allow the defense to reset. Defensively, the inability to consistently disrupt the opposing quarterback stood out just as much. There were stretches where pressure simply did not arrive, forcing the secondary to hold coverage longer than it realistically could. When a defense cannot generate pressure with four and hesitates to send extra rushers out of fear of exposing the back end, it becomes predictable. Predictability at this level is lethal. The opponent grew comfortable, settled into a rhythm, and capitalized on mistakes when they appeared. That comfort level should never exist in a game with this much on the line. What made it even more painful was the fact that the Ravens never truly lost control of the game. Every time it felt like the tide might turn permanently, they answered back. Touchdowns were traded. Momentum swung back and forth. And yet there was always the sense that one more stop or one more sustained drive could have ended it. That inability to land the knockout blow has followed this team before, and seeing it resurface in such a critical moment only intensified the disappointment. Through all of this, the quarterback's performance remained a bright, if bittersweet, constant. In the fourth quarter, he delivered exactly what critics have demanded for years. He stood tall in the pocket, made precise throws under pressure, and repeatedly put his team in position to win. Those final minutes were a showcase of poise and leadership, not panic. When people ask what stepping up in the biggest moments looks like, that sequence of drives should be part of the answer. The fact that it still ended in a loss does not erase the quality of play that preceded it. This season, more than any other, tested him in new ways. Injuries limited continuity, forced adjustments, and required patience that he had not always needed before. Playing through that adversity shaped both his approach and the way the offense functioned around him. Despite all of it, when the game demanded everything he had, he delivered. That reality makes the ending even harder to accept, because it reinforces the feeling that the window was open and the opportunity was real. The frustration now is not just about one game, but about what it represents in a broader sense. How many times can a team get this close before something has to change? How long can leadership point to effort and belief without tangible postseason results to match? These questions will not be answered immediately, and they should not be rushed. But they will linger throughout the offseason, hovering over every decision, every meeting, and every move this organization makes. That gap between being close and actually breaking through is where frustration quietly turns into pressure, especially for a roster that believes it has championship-level talent inside that locker room. There is no confusion about the expectations. This team is built to compete deep into January, not to talk about moral victories or what almost happened. When seasons end like this, players do not forget it. They carry those moments into workouts, meetings, and training camp, replaying them over and over. Knowing how thin the margin really is at this level, that awareness can either fracture a group or harden it. And the response over the coming months will say a lot about where this team is headed. There is also the reality that patience is wearing thin in certain areas. Fans have watched similar storylines unfold. Different opponents, different circumstances, but familiar endings, close games that slip away, critical moments that do not break their way, and questions about whether adjustments come quickly enough when the stakes rise. Those patterns do not define a franchise on their own, but when they repeat, they demand honest evaluation. This offseason will not be about surface-level fixes. It will be about identifying whether the current structure maximizes the talent on the field or leaves too much untapped when it matters most. And through it all, the quarterback remains the focal point, not because he failed, but because his performance raised the standard even higher. When your leader shows he can take over games in the most intense moments, the responsibility shifts to everyone else to meet that level. The Ravens now move forward knowing they have a player who can put them in position to win under the brightest lights. What comes next will depend on whether the rest of the organization can align around that reality and eliminate the small but costly breakdowns that keep turning opportunity into regret. As the offseason unfolds, the Ravens will have to confront these realities head-on. Roster decisions, scheme evaluations, and philosophical choices will all shape what comes next. The standard in Baltimore has always been competing for championships, not moral victories or close calls. This loss reinforced how close they are and how far they still have to go at the same time. The challenge now is ensuring that performances like this do not become another chapter in a story of what could have been, but instead serve as the foundation for meaningful change moving forward. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens, and hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. A shockwave is rippling through the AFC North after the Steelers' head coach delivered a fiery and unusually candid statement about the Ravens, igniting speculation across the league. The comments, made behind the scenes but already echoing loudly among insiders, blended sharp criticism with reluctant admiration, creating a narrative that feels less like a press quote and more like psychological warfare. According to people familiar with the situation, the Steelers coach did not hold back when addressing Baltimore's identity. He reportedly questioned the Ravens' consistency, suggesting that their physical style sometimes crosses the line between discipline and recklessness. There were hints that Baltimore relies too heavily on intimidation and tradition, rather than evolution, a remark that some around the league interpreted as a direct challenge to the Ravens' coaching philosophy, yet the tone shifted just as quickly. In the same breath, the Steelers coach is said to have praised the Ravens' resilience and ability to thrive under pressure, calling them one of the most mentally tough teams in football. He allegedly highlighted their defensive culture and the way they seem to manufacture confidence, regardless of circumstance. To some, this sounded like respect. To others, it felt like calculated mind games. The dual nature of the statement has fueled speculation about its true purpose. Was it a moment of honesty from a veteran coach who knows his rival too well? Or was it a strategic move designed to plant doubt inside the Ravens' locker room while firing up his own players? Around league circles, there is quiet chatter that this was no accident, but a deliberate message aimed at shifting the psychological balance of the rivalry. What makes the situation even more intriguing is the timing. With tensions already high between the two franchises, any public or semi-public jab carries extra weight. The Ravens are known for embracing an us against the world mentality, and comments like these could easily become bulletin board material. For now, both organizations are staying silent, but the damage or motivation may already be done. One thing is certain: when Steelers and Ravens collide again, these words will be remembered, dissected, and possibly answered on the field. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.